And before we get going, here's a word about our sponsors. SDHQ Motorsports is a powerhouse 30,000 square foot facility with 45 family members reporting for duty. This single owner, single location business is based out of Gilbert, Arizona. It can handle anything from a hot rod, daily driver, pre-runner, race vehicle, half-track or Kugelwagen, or just about any other project you need help with. Their skilled staff with hundreds of years of combined experience eats, sleeps, and breathes performance. So go check them out at sdhqmotorsports.com or check them out on Insta at sdhqmotorsports. The We Happy Few 506 podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Gettysburg Museum of History, home of the Major Dick Winters collection and the largest assortment of authentic Band of Brothers artifacts in the world. Visit the free museum at 219 Baltimore Street in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, or at www.gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com, and on the YouTube channel, The History Underground, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Well, hello, my gentle friends, and welcome along to another We Happy Few 506 podcast, The Nearly Men, with myself, puerile Matthew Leach, and his giggling co-host, Doug Allen. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, dear Matthew. I'm very well.
Good.
How are you? You look kind of rough and ready today. You look like you've done a day's work, manual labor today.
That's because I've done a day's work manual labor today. I've been under a car all day and I'm freezing cold. I still haven't warmed up. I've been titting around with an exhaust all day in the freezing cold. So at one point I'll wake up and look mildly fresher than I do now.
Is this the same car that you were trying to fix a few weeks ago, and then a few weeks before that? Is this the same car?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Things keep dropping off it, or breaking, or bursting, or I don't know. This, I'm hoping. What it was the muffler fell off, which is, for anybody who doesn't know what a muffler is, it's that sort of bit that sticks out the back of your exhaust. Looks like a little tank that completely sheared and snapped off. So I managed to fix another one onto it, which made me feel like the men of all men. Then I put my key into the ignition and turned it, and it still made a massive bin. So I felt terrible about myself. And then I realized it had broken actually under the engine as well.
In the manifold.
So I managed to sort of fix that today. I say I stood around in a mostly USO capacity while my father-in-law fixed it, but I did some of the pulling and yanking as well. Any road up, as they say in the north of England. We have a guest today by the name of Seth Aaron Walters, who I initially thought might be a quarterback that took ayahuasca, but instead he's a podcaster that takes ayahuasca. Seth, welcome to the show.
Hi, Seth.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is a true dream come true for me. So thank you for having me.
Sweet. So you are a podcaster in and of yourself, and you host a pod called the SNAFU Podcast. Is that true?
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So tell us about that.
So it is a audio drama. Think of it as like a audiobook about a bomber crew in the 8th Air Force during the early months of 1944, and it just follows their story of them trying to survive their 25 missions and get home, which with every mission they fly, they're finding out is becoming less and less of a chance. So it's primarily giving audiences a kind of a glance into what the men of the 8th Air Force went through, what their day-to-day experiences were, things like the mental stresses of aerial combat in World War II, but also kind of dives into more of a philosophical aspect of like how to find hope in a hopeless environment, that kind of thing.
Is it fictional?
It's historical fiction. So
right.
It originally, when I first started writing this and when I was in college, years and years and years ago, I was trying to do kind of like a Band of Brothers thing where it was set in the 92nd Bombardment Group over in Poddington. But then I kind of went away from that and thought I just didn't feel comfortable portraying like real people's lives because, that's going to be their legacy if people started to actually read this. I kind of switched gears and kind of took inspiration from the movie and the show 12 O'Clock High, which, you know, they took, they made a fictional bombardment group and then based it off of real bombardment groups and real missions and kind of made a fictional story out of that. So that's kind of the same approach I had with SNAFU. So it's the 300th bombardment group, which obviously is a fictional bomb group, but it's based off of the 92nd, the 96th, and the 381st. And they're stationed at Thurlow, Greater Thurlow, which isn't a fictional town. Obviously, it's real, but the airfield itself is fictional. And then the missions that are depicted, everything except for the March 6th bombing of Berlin, everything else is fictionalized, but they are actual targets and actual missions that the 8th Air Force flew around that same time period. It's just, you know, didn't happen on that exact day, but it's again, like it's you get the idea of what an average mission in 1944 would have looked like.
You must have done an extraordinary amount of research then into.
Oh yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about, you know, what was your main source? Did it come from one source mainly, or was it a range of different books and archives that you know?
Well, so well, again, like I said, it started when I was in college, and really it was just more of a writing exercise that I was doing. And eventually, like in the first year or so of doing that, I was working as a general manager of a Dunkin' Donuts here in town, and there was a bunch of older gentlemen that would come in at like 4:30 in the morning, and one of them I found out was a veteran of the Second World War, and I kind of got to talking to him a little bit and found out that not only was he a veteran of the Second World War, but he was a co-pilot of a B-17 in the 96th bombardment group in the exact months that my story took place in. So I immediately kind of used him. Like I started asking him all kinds of questions about his experiences and what his day-to-day looked like as a member of the Army Air Corps. And then I revealed to him months later, that I was writing this novel, this story. And that's when he told me that after being in the Army Air Corps, he retired as an English teacher. So I was like, if there's ever a person in this world that I need to like ask questions, it's this guy. And I eventually got the courage to ask him if he would read what I had written so far. And so he actually read what became season 1 of SNAFU, and about a month later gave it back to me. And besides telling me that my spelling and grammar was horrific and told me I needed to spend more time learning how to do proper grammar and spelling, he mainly criticized what I'd written as, he's like, there's some, historical inaccuracies. He said, but the tone of this is all off. He said, so, he, in a very, very, very nice way, told me, he's like, listen, I can tell you have a lot of admiration and a lot of love for history and World War II and the 8th Air Force and such. He said, that comes out extremely clear in your writing, and, basically said you write with a lot of glory, but you have to understand there was nothing glorious about what we did over there. What we did was just a job, and it was a very hard job. And those who came back deeply affected by what they experienced and what they saw and what they were tasked to do. And he gave me a bunch of books. There's a book by Jack Novy called I think it's called The Cold Blue. A book by Truman A. Smith called The Wrong Stuff, which was a huge inspiration for SNAFU. As a podcast, I should say. And then, down the line, Masters of the Air came up. And so I started reading all of those books. I actually took almost a year and a half off of writing my story to kind of do more research. And then through reading article after article, book after book, I also, through this guy that I was talking to, his name was Alex, he kind of gave me a list of people, veterans, that either he knew that also fought in the 8th Air Force, but also some people that fought in Korea and Vietnam. So I started talking to them as well, not just about the historical aspect, but like the psychological aspect of combat and of war. And so it was through not just like books and articles and stuff, but also just talking to guys directly and just asking them about their personal experiences. And unfortunately, just about every one of those guys that I talked to have since passed away. Mm-hmm. And I was very happy with the time that they gave me, and all of them were extremely generous with their time and shared a lot of things that I wasn't expecting them to share. And Alex, for example, gave me his flight logs, a lot of just valuable information that has helped a great deal with SNAFU. But yeah, so just books, articles, obviously media too. One of the things I found actually really, really, really helpful was reading the goof section on IMDb on movies like Memphis Belle, 12 O'Clock High. So yeah, it's kind of just about anywhere I could find information I went to.
Mm. Wow. So when you reached out, so Seth reached out, so can I come on the pod? Can we have a chat? It was ostensibly a tete-a-tete about Masters of the Air. And I'll be honest, we'll start with Masters of the Air, the book. We'll go on to expectations and all that kind of stuff. I haven't read Masters of the Air, so I will read Masters of the Air. I'm very much looking forward to the show. What is it about the book that has had you read it half a dozen times?
Well, what drew me to it originally was just to get more information for SNAFU, and just general interest. But the thing that has time and time again brought me back to it, one is the incredible writing of Donald L. Miller. Like I've read Band of Brothers, I've read Citizen Soldier, I've read a lot of books that are like it. Of course, a lot of on the 8th Air Force, and Donald Miller's like writing is especially I highly recommend if you're going to read it, highly recommend the audiobook, because I forget the name of the guy who narrates it, but the guy, like his voice mixed in with Donald's writing is like a perfect mixture. It's so well written, so well done. The stories are extremely haunting. Some of the most heartbreaking stories I've ever heard in regards to World War II were found in that book. Things that are just it's unbelievable to hear them. So it's like it's those, and then also I guess it's not just Masters of the Air. It's really just the whole air war in general. The thing that has always interests me about it and I just keep going back to it, is just how insane the whole process was. Like, 1944, 1943 wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things. But when you look at what these guys were tasked to do, it's very like rudimentary. It's almost barbaric in how it's like you take a bunch of men, put them in a unpressurized Coke can with wings that has hardly any armor on it, give them a bunch of machine guns, fill the plane up with bombs and fuel, send it over behind enemy lines, where the Germans are going to send up as much firepower as possible to knock them out of the sky, and hope they come back. Like it's the craziest idea, and we really didn't do that before World War II.
It's no coincidence.
Was that?
Well, I'm saying that it's no coincidence that Catch-22 was written about a bomb group.
Yeah.
and the insanity of that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And since World War II, we haven't seen anything quite like that. That type of warfare pretty much ended after World War II, because even by 1945, with the B-29, pressurized aircraft were becoming the newest thing, and they just had a way better way of doing it, and men weren't necessarily put into that horrific situation that they were, and so it's a remarkable story. And again, going back to the whole idea of how do you find hope in a hopeless environment, there's so much leadership examples that can be taken from the 8th Air Force and be applied to everyday life, business, and such. Because, these officers and these crew members, they were tasked at essentially, once they realized that their job was pretty much a suicide mission, your chances of getting through your tour and getting back home were less than 25%. A lot of men had to kind of wrestle with the idea of like, you don't have the motivation of doing a job and then getting back to your girl back home. You're here, you're more than likely not going to go back. And so how do you stay focused? How do you still find hope? Where do you get the motivation to get up and go on a mission? And so it's a lot of psychological things too about the air war that I just find intriguing and fascinating.
And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 31.
31. And when did your interest start in this?
So I actually don't remember how old I was. I was either 4 or 5. And I had watched the movie Memphis Belle. Right. And for reasons that I will leave up to the divine to answer, I just became obsessed with just
Doug, you mean?
The B-17 and the 8th Air Force, and I just that was my favorite movie as a kid. In fact, I watched that movie so much when I was younger that not only did I wear out the tape on the VHS tape, but to this day, if I can't sleep at night, I can close my eyes and I can visualize and watch the entire movie in my brain. And usually before I can even get to the dance party scene, I'm out like but yeah, that was kind of where it started. And I just never, it's always been just that obsession or that love and fascination with the B-17, the 8th Air Force. And then that, of course, also led to my love and fascination with World War II. Plus, the military service runs deep within my family. My dad was a veteran of the Gulf War, served in the 1st Armored Division. Both sets of grandparents on both sides of the family fought in Vietnam and during the Cold War. I have grandparents who fought in the Second World War. So the military has always run really strong within the family. And I was kind of raised on war movies and war documentaries and such. So it just always kind of made sense. But yeah, that the love of the B-17 and the 8th Air Force specifically goes as far back as I can remember.
Well, I like the idea of you having a VHS copy of Memphis Belle that runs out as just pixelates because you've watched it too much. I used to have a copy of Flash Gordon that was a bit like that. They used to pixelate over Ming's daughter, but we won't go into that too much.
I had the copy of Where Eagles Dare, and the same thing.
Really?
Yeah, I must have watched that.
Nice.
150, 160 times from the age of like 9 till 16 or 17 or something. I just watched that endlessly. And it was when you were saying that you could just go to sleep and start the movie in your head and get
you do it to Where Eagles Dare.
Yeah.
Calling Danny boy. Yes. Yeah. So I got a question, and it's totally subjective, Seth, but I thought I'd ask it you anyway. Do you think it's going to be a smooth transition from the book to the screen, or how do you foresee it? I mean, are you going to be one of those people that's read the book a dozen times and is always going to be slightly disappointed and frustrated, or are you going into it with a sort of clean slate, or are the things that that's got to be in it, that's got to be in the show, or are there certain expectations?
Well, so the benefit of doing a series on something like Masters of the Air is that the book is, I mean, it's a thick book. I mean, you could use it, to protect yourself in a home invasion. It's giant. But so it's a really, like, I don't want to say brief because it is detailed, but it's an overview of the 8th Air Force from the time that it's formed in Savannah, Georgia, in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, and follows it all the way to the end of the war. And because of that you see characters get brought up, and then it tells their story at that time. Then in the next chapter, we'll go on to tell somebody else's story, and then you might come back to that original person. So it's written sort of like how Band of Brothers is, oddly enough, shot, where each episode is really focusing in on one person's story, and then that person might have a very a big moment or a big scene in a later episode, but at the end of that episode, you really feel like you have an understanding, or at least a good grasp on who that person is and what their motivations are, their background, all that. So the John Orloff, who I know was a huge part of Band of Brothers, is on this project as well. I have hope and faith that he's gonna kind of lean into that sort of thing too, where each episode, and I'm just completely making a prediction here, but like how I think it's going to go is each episode is going to be focusing on a different part of the air war and focusing in on a person, whether it be Clevin or whether it be Rosenthal or whoever it is. And then as the show progresses, those people's lives might intertwine with one another. That'd be a really cool way of doing it. But really, there's so much in the book. You could really hone in on just one part of it. Based off of the trailer, I don't think they're going to do that. Or you could do a very brief overview of the whole thing. I know in the trailer they included, there was shots of the Tuskegee Airmen, which weren't a part of the 8th Air Force, but they did overlap with what the 8th Air Force was doing. So I'm guessing they might have a B story or a whole episode dedicated to just them. I don't know. You could kind of just do, there's so many things you could do with it. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping they go that route. Whereas, and I don't want to sound like I'm dogging on this show, but like the thing that about the Pacific, I feel like was, while that show was incredible, I think one of the things they kind of missed out on is that would have made the show go from good to great is they try to do way too many storylines in each episode, whereas they could have just broken it up. So you could have had a whole episode where you're really getting to know, like Barcelona, for example, one episode where you're really getting to know Sledge, and then you get like at least as a viewer, I never really got too attached to the Pacific just because, I didn't feel like I was really getting to know each character in depth like I did with Band of Brothers or like Saving Private Ryan or something. So I hope that answers your question.
You did. And now I have a question which might put you more on the spot. I wasn't sure whether I was going to ask this question or not, and I need to phrase it in a way that doesn't make me sound like a total dick. Some of the way that the Pacific is filmed differs from the way that Band is filmed, in that it's not filmed with a shaky cam POV, so you don't feel like you're there. Mm. Also, I'm not sure if this is true, but from my recollection, when I look back on it, it's quite colourful, Pacific.
Yeah.
Whereas Band and Private Ryan had what's known as a bleach bypass effect, which Doug could explain to you better than I can. But that's what makes it look so grainy and old and like found footage. Mm. I've looked at the trailer for Masters of the Air, and it seems to not have either of those two things as well. In fact, it looks quite blockbustery. Could this... It looks amazing. Don't get me wrong. It looks absolutely freaking amazing. I can't wait to see it, and I'm fascinated by it. But do you think that might cause some dissonance with the audience? Like with Band, with Private Ryan, I'll just talk about Private Ryan because I was in Band and I don't want to talk about Band, but I'll talk about Private Ryan. Those opening scenes on the beaches, I felt sick for 3 days after that. I couldn't eat anything. I just felt weird and nauseous. I felt like I was there. It was the most horrendous thing I've seen. And because of the shaky cam and because of the bleach bypass and all the rest of it, you just kind of felt like you were there, and the sound and everything. It seems, just from looking at the trailer, that maybe Masters has gone more of a kind of blockbustery look. What do you feel about that? I know you've seen the trailer as well, Doug. I mean, I'm not trying to rag on the show. I can't wait to see it. I don't think it's great, but I'm wondering whether it's going to have the same visceral effect. Or, when you look at that old footage, like the Cold Blue, which William Wyler stuff was all shot in that beautiful 16mm. So maybe it does lend itself to
Right.
stuff in the air. I don't know. I'm just posing the question that those amazing shots
Sure.
of like the B-17s and stuff in the cold blue are all that sort of beautifully colored.
Yeah, that's what
Maybe
that.
maybe it needs a look all of its own. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's why I kind of think if you're going to shoot something that's going to take place in the sky with such rich colors,
Yes.
you know, you would want, do you know what I mean? The color palette would be very, very different than what
Yeah,
it
exactly
would
right.
be.
So
You
it
know,
would
in the
have its own color
greens,
pattern.
with
Yeah,
green
yeah.
uniforms and green bush and, you know, and everything kind of covered in mud and rain and stuff. Up there, the sun is always shining above the cloud line. So it is going to have, it is going to look different. But I do see what you mean if they've kind of, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
I,
possibly as well. You know, you've got.
So
Well, I'm saying you've got someone of
go
a
ahead. Go ahead.
profile of Austin Butler as one of the leads as well. I don't know. Like we were just a bunch of unknowns.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so like, you could kind of buy into it.
Mhm.
I don't know whether it's going to be more sort of filmic, like classically filmic, almost like a 40s movie type filmic. I still think it's going to be awesome. I'm not trying to rag on it in any way. I'm just kind of I think it's just going to be a different experience.
Yeah.
I was thinking the exact same thing actually when I first saw the first trailer. It was, you know, I was kind of like it to me visually it looks a lot like Red Tails.
Right.
Which
I got
I
cut
don't,
out
you
of.
know,
So I never watched that.
the thing that like yeah, uncredited role.
Yes, indeed.
Which the thing that like again, not to get into the gripes about that movie, but one of the things that I have really never heard anyone quite complain about was how that movie looked. So I don't necessarily think, especially now, because like I think Band of Brothers, the way that it looks, like the cinematography of it, makes sense for 2001, and like it to me, it does feel raw and visceral because if you know it feels like you're there, and because of the color palette and all that, it's really like immersive. Whereas the Pacific, because the whole thing is featured in the Pacific theater of the war, where it's much warmer, it's much more tropical. The color scheme were kind of really, at least for me, it made total sense to the type of warfare. I would have liked to have seen more of the shaky cam way that it was shot. I do think that kind of would have added a lot more character to it. In regards to Masters of the Air, as far as how it looks, the only thing I'm really concerned with, and it doesn't seem to look too bad, is my main concern was I really love the practical effects of the Memphis Belle. Like you really can't like it's a whole different feel when you're seeing real planes flying in the sky versus CGI. And based on what I've seen, it's a really good, like they did a really good job with kind of meeting in the middle, where there are some shots that if it's not practical effects, I don't know how they got the CGI to look so good. But then there's some like where you could tell it's CGI, but it's done really, really, really well that it doesn't look off. And so as far as how it looks and such, I don't think, especially now that, you know, we're living in 2023, I don't think many people are gonna notice. I'll put it this way, is the thing that most people love about a TV show, I feel, is the story that it tells and the characters that it portrays. The color, the way that it looks, the color palette, the CGI, all that is kind of just that's like the garnish on the plate. You know, because there's so many things out there that have a cult following because of the story that it tells. And the complaints that I have, and I've heard other people have about shows like the Pacific, is because it always geared about the fact that like there was just so much in such a little time, and they loved about Band of Brothers was you really got to know the characters. Were in the Pacific, you really didn't get a lot of time to get to know each person like you would have if it was told like Band of Brothers. So I think as far as I'm trying to go into it with like not high expectations, but also not low expectations either. I don't know. I also have to keep in mind too that they're gonna have Austin Butler be heavily featured in the trailer just because he's the hottest star right now coming off of Elvis. So of course they're gonna have him plastered on everything. I don't see how they could have an entire show just following his story when there's so much in the book that kind of is outside of his. Because in the book, like Rosie Rosenthal is way more of a main character, I feel, than Clevin was. But that's now I'm just kind of mumbling. But yeah.
So I've got a question for you as well. So we spoke a bit about Private Ryan and the beach scene, and how that had a visceral and vivid effect upon me, because I never, and it hadn't been put on film before. Nothing of that kind of carnage, that amount of detail, historical accuracy, and suddenly you're in the cinema and you're watching it, and you're just thinking, "Oh my goodness me!" What would you think? Are we going to learn in a similar vein about the guys in the air war that we just never considered? Because we never considered the carnage on the beaches. I mean, we read about it a little bit in books. There's The Longest Day and all that kind of stuff. It's not very immersive.
Sure.
What are we going to learn? Is it the claustrophobia? Is it like what's it like under flak attack? Is it like what it's like to be attacked by fighters? Is it stuff that's just kind of blow our minds in the same way that Private Ryan's the opening beach landing scenes did? Just as someone who has a historical interest, you'd be like, you wait until you see this.
Sure. The claustrophobia definitely is a huge one. Because when you see something like the B-17, you really don't truly don't get the impression of just how claustrophobic the inside of those things are. Now, I haven't been inside of a B-17 in quite some time. I was a little kid. I was probably 8 years old when I got a chance to kind of like walk through the inside of the B-17. And even at 8 years old, I could not wrap my head around how 18 and 19-year-old guys in full flight suits and equipment were able to squeeze their way through that thing. Just when it was flying, not to mention if that thing gets shot down out of the sky, you have, in a good situation, you have like 20 seconds to get yourself out of that plane when it's falling towards Earth in such a cramped space. It's unfathomable. So like there's that aspect. The other thing that I think a lot of people are going to be, I think, surprised by, and I won't be shocked if a lot of people chalk it up to being Hollywood, exaggerating it, is just so like let's say you're a gunner, a waist gunner on a B-17. The temperatures out when you're up in cruising altitudes, you're flying at 25 to 30,000 feet. The temperatures, because it's not pressurized, you're being exposed to temperatures of 30 below Fahrenheit, or like as low as negative 75. And, that's not just still air, that's, rushing air of 150 miles an hour going into your compartment. So you've got below freezing temperatures. Your equipment at that time was not really good. You had to wear all these layers of clothes, which made everything so bulky. So if you did get wounded, you had all these layers. I always think about that scene in Band of Brothers when Hoopler accidentally shoots himself and they're trying to remove all the layers to get to the wound. And because of all those layers, it makes it just that much harder to kind of, one, treat him, and two, to see how bad it is. It was like that for the 8th Air Force. They had all these layers of clothes to keep themselves warm. So if you got hit, it was nearly impossible to kind of see just how bad it was, and to be able to treat it or administer things like morphine. The equipment that they had, what we have today in the modern day equivalent of the heated blanket, that technology actually started to make heated suits for the 8th Air Force. It was the first time this type of technology had ever been really created, and those hardly ever worked. There was horrific stories that some of the guys told me about the fact that because 18-year-olds even back then, after every mission, they would take their clothes and they would roll them into a ball and stuff them in a locker somewhere. And those suits had, just like a heated blanket has today, they had those little wire coils that would go throughout the suit. Well, those coils would get bent and they would break. And what would happen was, if you're up, 30,000 feet and you have got German fighters trying to, they're shooting at you, you break into a nervous sweat. Or sometimes, because you're up there for 8 hours plus, you accidentally urinate on yourself without realizing it. That moisture in contact with a broken wire creates an electric shock. So guys were getting burned, guys were getting electrocuted. They not to mention their oxygen masks, especially the American ones, would often saliva would get clogged in their mask without them realizing it. So one of the things that it was the co-pilot's duty to every 10 to 15 minutes, had to do an oxygen check on all the members of the crew to make sure that their meters were reading correctly, because what was happening was, especially in like a firefight, was these men, their masks would get clogged and they would pass out from a lack of oxygen without even realizing it. So like, or if their mask had a leak in it or something. So you had that the elements are trying to kill you. Again, the plane that you're flying in doesn't have a lot of armament on it. So, Alex, the main guy that I talked to, said that you could take a screwdriver and with your hand push right through the skin of a B-17. It really wasn't. It was about the same thickness as a credit card. So if you got bullets and flak coming at you, there's nothing stopping it from getting to you. So you've got the elements trying to kill you. You've got the fighters trying to kill you. You've got flak trying to kill you. You've got other pilots that aren't keeping formation accidentally trying to kill you, because these air collisions happened quite frequently. Another thing that a lot of people probably don't realize is that the way that these formations were set up, because sometimes you would have anywhere between 300 to 1,000 planes on one raid. They were stacked 3 groups high. So each group has 18 to 20 B-17s. Times that by 3, that's one column. If you're one of the planes in the lower group, when the bombs were dropped, it wasn't. It happened quite frequently that a bomb from one of the higher groups would accidentally fall on one of the bombers in the lower group. So you had like those hazards to think about. It was just again, you look at it from afar, you're like, this is absolutely insane. Like, how did the U.S. military think this was ever going to work? And even, I mean, like the Brits, you guys tried telling us, hey, daylight bombing is not a good idea. Please don't do it. And us stubborn Americans were like, yeah, we're going to do it anyways.
we wrote the war. We wrote the book on how to fight a war ineptly throughout time. So if we tell you something doesn't work, I'm telling you, it doesn't work. We tried it several different ways and it didn't work.
But that's an incredible. That's really interesting, Seth. I'm going to really watch out for those elements, because these are the things exactly what you've been saying that make like the Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan. These things you just don't think of, how many different ways you could basically be killed or maimed. Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing that's going to really help people, and being able, I mean, obviously their breath would just freeze up there in minus 30. They must have face masks stuck to their face, pulls their skin off. Like it must be. And then you've got the fumes from the engines coming through, and it must have been. And everything, I'm sure, is just vibrating. Everything is just vibrating and utterly noisy and loud. And what a place.
I've just thought of that. Perhaps this is nothing, but the gunners with the open door, the gunners, bam, 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 bam. Do the spent cartridges ever hit the wind and fly back and smack you as well? That must have been a hazard as well.
Oh, I'm sure that
that
these kinds of things
freaking
happen. Now, I will say, in but depending on, because a lot of these things that they added to the B-17 started off as just things that bomber crews just did in the field, and then later, like, the U.S. military heard about this, and then they would make modifications to the B-17. One of them was in the late summer of 1944. They started to, and get this is just revolutionary, they decided to start putting like sealed windows on the waist guns of the B-17 to stop air from coming in. And they found out that, amazingly, when you do that, it's not so cold on the inside, and gunners have a much easier time of seeing, and they don't have to wear heavy goggles that fog up and such. So, I'm sure that even when like because the other thing that you really do see this in Memphis Belle is all those cartridges just kind of they're falling into the inside the plane. Really, I think the only positions on the B-17 where the cartridges were they weren't ejected inside were the tail gun and the ball turret. Everybody else, their bullets just kind of their shell casings just exited inside the plane. So I remember one guy I spoke with, he was a waist gunner on a B-17. He said that when you're in the middle of a firefight, you're stepping on all those shells. It's extremely slippery. So it's like you're essentially standing on ice, trying to protect yourself from incoming attacks, and you're constantly having to move to see incoming fighters, and your legs are slipping out from underneath you. He just said it was extremely frustrating at times. So like that happened. There was one story, kind of, if you want a hilarious one, there's a story in Truman A. Smith's book. I think it's Truman A. Smith's, one of the books, I forget now, but one of the books tells a story of a top turret gunner in a B-17, and he was when they were crossing over the channel, the crews would all test fire their guns to make sure that they didn't freeze or they didn't they didn't get jammed or something. And while the group is test firing their guns, their top turret gunner, the engineer, the flight engineer rather, sorry, he all of a sudden just screams that he's been hit, and everyone's looking around trying to figure out, like, where are they? No one reported any enemy fighters. Here, a empty shell from one of the above B-17s had come down and had punctured his top turret plexiglass window and had hit him, and it hurt so bad that he thought that he had been shot. So those kinds of things happened all the time too. Just silly, ridiculous things, really.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll turn the tables. As part of the reciprocity for you coming on here was that you were going to ask us a couple of questions. Seth said that he's had some questions he wanted to know about bands since he was 10 years old, which made me think he was a lot younger than me, and I didn't want to speak to him. But I'll answer them anyway, as will Dougie. Far away, Mr. Seth.
Well, I'm gonna specifically, instead of just talking generally about Band of Brothers, I'm kind of aim it more towards you guys specifically.
Okay.
First one is Doug. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but it's to my understanding that you came from a long line of woodworkers and carpenters, correct?
Correct.
You get out of school super early, work with the family business. At the age of, 26, you got out and became a firefighter or the fire brigade.
I was training in firefighter when I was 27. Which absolutely fascinating. Like, there was
like a year-long process to get into that or to be trained to be one. And then you, at the age of 29, you leave that to become an actor. One of your first roles is the film Gangster #1, and then the other one is the show called Band of Brothers for HBO, where you originally went for the role of Doc Rowe, correct?
Yep.
And then you instead get cast as Alton Moore. My question is how do you feel that you, with your unique upbringing and experiences, how do you feel that all of that allowed you to be the perfect role for someone like Alton Moore?
Oh, that's a good question. I think yeah, that is a good question. There was never too much known. We all got given kind of information packs, and Matt will remember this because you'd have got quite a lot, wouldn't you, Matt, on
Tab, yeah.
from Sergeant Talbot, the military files and all this kind of stuff. I didn't get too much for Alton Moore. And even though his widow was still alive, because he died in 57 in a car crash, I think she'd remarried. And she didn't really, like, I had an opportunity to meet her and she didn't really want to meet her. So I kind of got the sense that he was a bit of an outsider. I got the sense that he was a bit of a loner, a bit of a drinker, perhaps could have been quite a violent man as well. And probably not too sociable, which kind of, which...
Who are we talking about you here, Doug? Or
yeah. Well, this is what I mean. I kind of feel that it's, yeah, I think, I don't know how they would have known or cast me in that way. I think the reason I went up for Doc Rowe is I think actually quite a few of us read for Doc Rowe. I think that might have been, I came to learn that that was one of the audition pieces. Did you ever read for Doc Rowe, Matt?
No.
You just read for Tab straight away?
No, I read for 5 different people. My audition piece was Malarkey. And
right,
then, no, was it? Lieutenant Jones was one I read for. Colin Hanks' role. Don't know how he got that role. A couple of different.
Yeah, I kind of feel that, and especially, the size of the role. That, I mean, I had some scenes that I filmed that were cut, and the scenes that were cut were trading dead US soldiers' equipment, and so I think it kind of perhaps takes a special kind of person to kind of just do that, just take stuff, rob dead GIs' bodies and trade their knives or their gum or this, which is what I had a scene doing. And so I think he was quite a cold character, and on reflection, I kind of felt that at that time I was quite. I was actually a shy person, but I would have come across
as a massive dick.
Yeah, probably as quite, stay away from me, kind of get back kind of guy. And also, when I had a photo of him, I really did look like him as well. So, and that was obviously key. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Sure.
And I think that, with the looks, and I think that even from the auditions, maybe because I had, like we all did, 3, 4, 5 auditions for the role, and in none of those would I have been a very chatty. I mean, I'm not like Matt, I wouldn't have been able to just sort of go in and sort of start with a joke, do a bit of tap dancing, and then leave, which is what I'm sure Matt did.
I told you that in confidence.
But yeah, I think the character matched. Alton Moore matched my character pretty well, and that's just the cleverness of, and I think that was also down to not just the casting director, but also because we went back so much, we had 4 or 5 revisits. I think they really got a feel for us in that time. So I think it was well matched. But yeah, that's a really good question, actually. Thanks, Seth.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Absolutely. Um, yeah. I would say like um, talking about like having these questions since I was 10. One of the uh, like most heartwarming memories I have in regards to Band of Brothers was my wife just recently asked me what my favorite Christmas was. And I told her without even having to think about it, it was Christmas of 2003. I was living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, not too far from where Winters was living in Hershey. My mom actually worked over in Hershey, but that year I got two big gifts. My first big gift was I got my own room. I have a little brother who's 5 years younger than me, and this was the first time I had my own room since he was born. So that was kind of a big deal. But then my second big gift that I got that year was the DVD box set of Band of Brothers. And at that point, all I'd ever seen of Band of Brothers was what was featured on the History Channel. But usually it was always so late that I really couldn't stay up to watch it. And so I remember that night being in my own room and on my dad's Toshiba laptop, I watched the entire all 10 episodes of Band of Brothers in its entirety back to back, all throughout the night on Christmas Eve. And still to this day is one of the best Christmas gifts I ever got and one of my favorite Christmas memories of all time. So personally, I want to thank you guys so much for being such a huge part of my childhood and being a part of that and telling these men's stories that absolutely deserve to be told. But all right. So next question is and this is kind of, I guess, for both of you. One of the unique facts about Band of Brothers is the fact that you have so many British actors portraying American soldiers. What advantage does it have for you as an actor being a British person representing and portraying an American person? What advantage does that give you when you're trying to portray someone from a different culture, a different time period, and a different country?
I fielded this question a few times, and I think one of the advantages of being British, if you like, English or whatever, and playing someone from America at that time is that when English people put on an American accent, it doesn't sound like contemporary American. Like I can do a pretty good American accent, but I would struggle to do yours. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know why when we put on an American accent, it sounds slightly oldie worldy. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't sound as contemporary and as kind of front foot.
Sure.
So I think it allows the person watch. If you look at someone like Damian Lewis, the way that he talks in it doesn't sound like a contemporary American to me. The way that he talks, the way he moves, and anything, it seems like it's from somewhere else. And I don't know why it is that when we put on American accents, we sound like someone from a different era. And I think that lends itself really nicely to a show like that because, like, I don't know, like some of the American guys in it, I think had to tone down their contemporariness. Do you know what I mean? Someone like James Madio, who is so Bronx and so on the front foot and got a way of talking and his energy, like something, he has to tone it down a little bit because and then he talks about scenes where he wanted to get in some guy's face and all that shit, but like people wouldn't have done it back then. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know what you were going to say there, Doug, but almost some of the American guys had to kind of tone down their sort of front foot contemporary Americanism.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but instead of going with not just the accent, but the natural stillness that the reserved English have, I think that played as exactly as Matt was saying. It kind of plays into the hands of that time when you're, as Matt said, there was Americans, you use your body a lot more, and to tone that down to kind of relax them. And English actors we're just a more reserved people, And so we react in a more
Mm-hmm.
act in a more reserved way as well. And I think that stillness really helped convey that time as well. Definitely.
And
Yeah.
if you look back, even someone like that sort of Walter Cronkite type of voice,
Mm-hmm.
President Kennedy has now been, has been confirmed to be shot. He sounds kind of English when he's, do you know what I mean? It still had a slight Englishness to the accent back then.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense. I didn't think about it until you just said it. I mean, they obviously our American accent stems originally from the British accent because we're all came
Subjects of the crown, yeah. You will beg the crown back eventually. Don't worry. Re-embrace
yeah,
the crown.
America's like that bratty teenager that wanted to move out of mom and dad's house.
Boomerang kid. He's going to come back pretty soon.
Yeah. But I mean, so yeah, it makes sense that you guys have, you putting, you doing an American accent would naturally just sound kind of old timey because obviously we all came from that accent anyway. So it's kind of like you're just going back in time in a way. I never would have thought about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm a deeply intellectual human being.
But again, Seth, like the character I was playing, he seemed to me like a very simple working class character, and up until that point, I hadn't had an education in anything, and I think that also that kind of ignorance that I had, really, a lot of the other actors on the show had been. I mean, I'd been acting for about a year at that point, maybe 14, 15 or so. And Gangster Number One was the first time I'd ever acted. And
it didn't show at all.
Yeah, it didn't. Yeah, it did, is what he's saying. But so it's just a kind of a sort of a naivety and maybe a bit of a rawness as well, and quite a bit of inexperience that maybe kind of lent itself to getting all to more, because the more I think about it, I mean, everybody went up for it, didn't they, Matt?
Mm-hmm.
Every single male, whether they're in the US, England, Australia, between the age of 19 and 30, must have gone up for a role in Band of Brothers. So they had anyone they wanted. And it's one of those things where you do really think, well, when you're in a room with Tom Hanks and you're auditioning with him, I remember, because my parents were dead against it. They didn't want me to do it. They were like, you're a worker, you come from a long line of carpenters, you're uneducated, you can't do this. You're being stupid, basically. You're being ridiculous. And I remember sitting on the park bench in Green Park, and we had to do is it the Athenaeum Hotel, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Athenaeum Hotel, which is on Piccadilly. And I remember sitting on that bench, just watching the time, just every minute seemed like an hour waiting to go in. And I remember saying to myself, if there's any man in the world that can spot anything in another actor, then it's going to be this man. And so if I don't get this role, I'm just going to walk away from it, and I've got the job at the fire department waiting, and I'll just go back to that. And that's not what happened, but that was my thought on the day.
Stupid Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Misery and rejection. Yeah.
Exactly. A life of misery and rejection. Cheers, Tom. So we've done about an hour and a bit, Seth. We usually round out about now. So if you've got maybe just one killer question left, we'll do one more.
Okay. I do. Hold on. Okay. I have a hard hitting question, and then I have one simple question. Can I ask two questions?
Is that your question?
Crap.
All right.
Crap. Okay.
So we're going to end up now. Thanks for saying.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Okay. All right. Big one. Big question is, who is one person in the Band of Brothers story that you wish would have had more airtime on the show?
That's interesting.
Because I'm just thinking in an era of like biopics, like which one of the Band of Brothers characters
Okay.
would you love to have like their own?
I think I can answer that question.
Go on.
Okay.
Nixon. Because I think Nixon plays foil to Winters quite a lot, but you never really get to know it. And I would have liked a Nixon episode.
Yeah.
Not least because Ron Livingston is an absolutely effingly freaking brilliant actor. But
Yeah,
sure.
I think it would be nice to have got to know him other than, VAT 69, this, that, big eyes at the booze. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
I think it would have been really cool to actually get under his skin a little bit. Maybe after the Operation Varsity, something like that. I don't know.
I agree. I think that's a really good call.
Yeah.
Should have got his entire own episode, shouldn't he?
Yeah, because in a weird way, you kind of never get to know him over 10 episodes.
Yeah, and also
omnipresent.
He would go behind the lines and then he would just disappear and he's of somewhere else, and then he comes back with loads of intelligence that he's got, and it would be nice to have followed him on that journey. I guess I would agree with Matt there. I think that would have been a great episode, just to follow him somewhere in the Battle of the Bulge, somewhere doing what he does and following his journey, because he was a lot of it was Winter's foil, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Was the comedy set up a little bit, and a little bit of humor and a little bit dryness, and the VAT 69 and all this kind of stuff. You're right. Yeah.
Well, I've always said, like, as far as Nixon goes, the older I've gotten, one of the scenes and one of the moments in Band of Brothers that just hits me harder every single time is in episode 9, when after Nixon comes back from the jump, and he's just besides himself and just really just grieving the losses and all that. And then you see that stark contrast, but between him and Winters, and how Winters, at least how I read it is that Winters has kind of grown accustomed to the psychological torments of war, and Nixon's just now kind of going through those same things. And Winters is, there's that scene where he says to Nixon, like, did you hear me? Like, you got demoted. And like Nixon could care less about his rank or whatever. And that's just that scene is so palpable and so well done. I would have loved to have seen a whole episode just from Nixon's point of view on not just the war, but just, how through his eyes, how he sees all the men that we've come to know and love. So great pick.
And to be honest with you, I would have loved to have followed Nixon after the war. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. Because he end up working with Winters. They worked in the same firm together. I'd have just, after that baseball ground scene, and I would have loved to have just followed it just a little bit further.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Last simple question, short question is: was there anything from the Band of Brothers set that you still have in your possession? Doug, I'm specifically looking at you. Is there a fake photo book of possible some evil dictator's photos that you might have in your possession?
No, unfortunately. The only thing I do have is my dog tags, which I don't have close to my hand, but I do have those. And I think we all have them, ours still, don't we? They're my prized possession, and mine have done quite an incredible journey. A cousin of mine was in the Army Air Corps and did, I think, two tours of Afghanistan and 2 or 3 of Iraq, and my dog tags joined him on that. And then a very close friend of mine had cancer, and she held onto my dog tags, and she's now cured of cancer. She's given them back, so they've been around a little bit. Wow. Yeah, they're my good luck charm to people that are very dear in my life. If they're going through very hard times, then they get to look after those dog tags. So they're good things. Very, very, mean a great deal to me. Yeah.
And I have Doug Allen in my basement, so that's who I took. But I have put some nice art on the wall for him. I'll let you out one day, Doug.
What have you got, Matt? You've got, because I know Nolan took almost the entire wardrobe. Sergeant Croc.
I'm the same as you. Dog tags. That's it. And it was from the set, just dog tags. And then we were given like a fleece. I have that behind me, a cast and crew fleece, a knife. I think I gave to my brother, and I just give everything away. I gave one set of my dog tags to Tabs brother.
Mm.
My son used to use my other dog tags. He used to pretend he was the fat controller from Thomas the Tank Engine. It was a whistle.
Yeah.
So I let him play with it for a while. And then it was the weirdest thing. Like I was living in this little village in Surrey, and this lady came up to me and she was just like, "I'm sorry," very posh. She was like, I'm terribly sorry. You by any chance an actor? And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Were you in a show called Band of Brothers?" And I was like, "Yes." She says, my husband thought it was you. You left these in the play park, and it was my dog tags that my son was wearing because there was a train in the play park, and he'd been playing the fat controller, and he just left them on the floor there. And this guy that was obviously taking his kid to the play park thought, "That's that dude. That can't be. What's he doing here?" And then found my dog tags and gave it back to me.
And have you got your corporal jump boots? I think I lost mine in the last few years, but yeah.
No, I don't have any of that stuff. No, there were some certain fetishists that just sort of, I think, just sleep in all their gear still. But no, not me. I'm not one of them.
What would you have liked to?
Fassbender kept his jacket because he used to wear it all the time.
Yeah, so did Ross McCall. Ross McCall, I think, slept in his for about the next 3 years. Anytime I saw him, he was in his like jump jacket.
Yeah, Nolan nicked almost the entire props department.
Yeah, and then sold it to pay for his motorbikes, probably.
Yeah,
to start his Bitcoin empire.
Lieutenant Rick, who played Lieutenant Welsh, his prized possession is his leather jacket, the flight jacket.
Oh yeah, but that's super cool. I can understand why you'd take that.
Yeah.
I had a pair of aviators. They gave me a pair of aviators I wore in episode 10. I had those for a while. Those were cool. Yeah. Other than that, no. I mean, I probably, if I could go back in time, I'd probably nab a few things. But at the time, I didn't realize how big the show was going to be or anything like that. So I was never a pilferer of things from sets.
No, me neither. Yeah.
No. Right. Cool. I guess we'll call it quits. Seth, thank you so much for coming on. You have fun?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This, I guess, again, this was a huge dream come true. So thank you guys so much for giving me this opportunity.
It's been a pleasure meeting you, Seth. Absolute pleasure. And
absolute pleasure, mate. We'll send you an invoice for our time. Is it at SNAFU Podcast? Doug's not cheap, I'll tell you that for nothing. He's trying to buy his way out of my cellar.
Yeah, stay in touch, Seth, and we'll speak again soon for sure.
Right, thanks very much, Seth.
It'd be great to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah.
Cheers, man.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. See ya.
See you, man.
Bye.
Bye. He was a cool fellow, wasn't he? Cool young lad.
What a lovely guy. He's got a clear passion for it, isn't he? He's like a lifelong passion. Is really, really lovely. And I think what sounds sort of springboarded it is actually meeting veterans.
Yeah.
What it's saying, he was saying, the thing I forgot to ask him was like, he said he was working in Dunkin' Donuts and these veterans are coming at 4:30 a.m.
Now, I thought exactly the same thing. Are they doing that sort of thing where old folks wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go for a nice run and then tell everyone they've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning? Or have they been on the lash? That's what I want to know. Have they been on the smash all night and thought, we got to get a Dunkin', man?
Yeah, exactly. So if you have listened to this, Seth, then please let us know what they were doing.
Did they stagger through the door, smashing into stuff, beer in hand after Dunkin', or were they full of vim and vigor after getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning? We would like to know here at the We Happy Few 506 podcast.
We would.
All right, buddy. I'm going to get out of here. My father-in-law is staying over. I should go and do some entertaining / get my kids to bed. Yes, been a pleasure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll speak to you again next week.
See you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.